The night, the abrupt end to Ray's golf game due to a heavy downpour left him somewhat disheartened. Golf was not just a leisure activity for him, it was his primary form of exercise, vital for his well-being, especially given his heart condition. At 64, Ray was still quite active, maintaining a healthy lifestyle, tending to the yard work at the home he shared with his wife, Josie, of 40 years. Returning home early, around 9 a.m. instead of the usual 12:30 p.m., Ray didn't bother to inform Josie. Such a change in routine wasn't unusual and didn't seem to necessitate a call. But upon entering his house, the reason for calling ahead became starkly clear. Josie was there, unexpectedly, in her pink silk robe, which was loosely tied. But what truly caught Ray's attention was the presence of a much younger man, someone even younger than their daughter, being shown out by Josie in such an informal state. Josie, at 59, still carried an air of attractiveness, her dark blonde hair falling just around her shoulders. Time had brought changes to her physique, but none that diminished how Ray saw her. Yet, the scene unfolding before him was perplexing and unsettling. Josie's hair was tousled, and her appearance hinted at a recent, intimate encounter. As Ray entered, Josie greeted him with her usual warm smile, seemingly oblivious to the oddity of the situation. She moved in to give him a kiss, but Ray, taken aback by the scene he had just witnessed, dodged her advance. "Josie, what's going on?" Ray asked, his voice a mix of confusion and disbelief. Josie seemed to suddenly become aware of the awkwardness of the situation, glancing back at the young man as if she had just remembered he was there. "Oh, Ray, I apologize. This is Luke. Luke, meet my husband, Ray." Luke was slightly shorter than Ray, who stood at 6 feet. He had a fit physique, suggesting a background in sports during his younger years. His dark brown hair was short, and his features were average. He confidently stepped forward, placing a hand on Ray's shoulder. Ray felt a surge of emotion but managed to keep his composure. "Nice to meet you, Ray. Josie speaks highly of you. I guess in a couple of decades, I might face the same challenges you do, and I hope I handle them as well as you seem to." What Ray missed most was his intimacy with Josie. Time had affected his physical capabilities, but they adapted, finding other ways to maintain their connection. Ray had always focused on ensuring Josie's happiness, deriving his own satisfaction from hers. But it seemed that wasn't enough. Ray met Luke's smile with a cold look. He couldn't fathom Luke's audacity but controlled his anger. "Luke, I need you to leave my house. And don't come back, or it won't end well. I'm serious." Luke's smile vanished as he backed away and left through the front door. Ray locked the door behind him, exchanging a brief look with Josie, then headed to his bedroom, filled with anger and confusion over Josie's apparent indifference. Josie followed him shortly, her demeanor more composed. "That was uncalled for," she remarked. Ray, stunned by her reaction after what had transpired, couldn't help but respond, his patience reaching its limit. "Was that necessary? I come home to find you saying goodbye to some young guy, and I'm the one who's out of line. You've lost it." Josie's expression softened. She approached him, reaching out to touch his shoulder, but he recoiled from her. "Listen, I'm sorry. It's been a while. What we have is nice, but it's not enough for me. You could have mentioned that before. Where did this guy come from?" "He's a friend of Marjorie's." "A friend? He looks way younger than her." "Well, he was single back then. When Marjorie started seeing Oscar, she stopped seeing him. But we talked, and she passed his contact to me. You do realize he's just taking advantage of the situation." "He actually mentioned his preference for older women," Josie countered. "Started when he was helping neighbors with chores as a teenager. He said that experiences with them changed his outlook. And even if he's just looking for a fling, so am I, so what's the harm?" "How long has this been happening?" Ray inquired. "A few months. He comes over when you're golfing. I make sure everything's back to normal before you return. It doesn't interfere with you. You have your hobby, and I have mine, in a way." Ray suddenly understood why Saturdays had become the day for fresh sheets. "Well, I don't care if you think it's okay because I'm not around. I won't stand for it. I'll even stop playing golf if I must. Raymond, think about this. You need your golf, and I have needs that can be met during that time. It's logical. It might seem that way to you, Josephine, but not to me." This was the last straw. After that, Ray headed to the bedroom for a shower and a change of clothes. Josie dressed and left the house, driving to Christine's place, where she lived with her husband and their 2 daughters, Josie's grandkids. After Ray had showered and dressed, he noticed the house was eerily quiet, devoid of any presence. The absence of a note led him to surmise that his wife had chosen to distance herself from him, a sentiment he reciprocated. The shower had been a soothing respite, allowing him to ponder over the situation with a clearer mind. He grappled with understanding his wife Josie's actions, finding them excessive and something he couldn't imagine himself doing under similar circumstances. He felt justified in his stance, believing that Josie would have to come to terms with it. The following day, a festive 4th of July, promised a family gathering for a lunchtime cookout, followed by a visit to the community park for fireworks in the evening. This tradition, cherished since Christine's childhood, was an event Ray eagerly anticipated each year. Ray busied himself in the morning with preparations, marinating chicken and burgers, and setting aside hot dogs for the younger guests. By the time the first guests arrived, everything was perfectly arranged, and Ray was ready to immerse himself in the joy of family time. The barbecue was a delightful affair, buzzing with friends and family. Josie, amidst the merry chatter and laughter, appeared particularly radiant. Ray, despite his recent upset over her indiscretion, couldn't deny the many years of companionship and love they had shared. He was willing to forgive her, at least this time. As the afternoon waned, Ray, mindful of his heart condition and the need to conserve energy for the evening's activities, excused himself for a rest. After a brief nap, he awoke rejuvenated, dressed afresh, and joined his family in the living room. Gathered around the dining table were his closest family members, Josie at one end, his granddaughters Julia and Allison, Christine and her husband Eric, and his son Leo with his wife Rebecca. The arrangement and their expressions made it clear to Ray that this was no ordinary family meeting. Sensing the gravity of the moment, Ray inquired, "What's this?" Christine, Ray's daughter, seemed to be the unofficial leader of the family gathering. "Dad, we need to discuss Mom," she began, her tone cautious yet firm. Ray's gaze shifted to his wife, searching for any sign of emotion, but her face remained impassive. An uneasy feeling settled in his stomach, a premonition of the conversation's direction. He returned his attention to Christine. "What about Mom?" "She's told us about Luke," Christine revealed. "Really now?" Ray couldn't hide his disbelief. "Yes, and she mentioned certain difficulties you two have been facing." Ray was taken aback, stunned by his wife's openness about such private matters with their children and grandchildren. "Those difficulties, and frankly this entire situation, are not something for you all to be involved in. But we care about Mom's happiness," Christine insisted. Turning to his wife, Ray sought confirmation. "Are you unhappy?" Josie quickly reassured him. "No, Ray, I am happy. Don't doubt that. However, she has certain needs, Dad," Christine interjected. "Needs that you're, well, unable to fulfill. Isn't that correct?" Ray felt a wave of disbelief. "So, you think I'm being unreasonable or selfish by not accepting this situation?" "We're not trying to label your actions, Dad. We just think that since you're unable to meet those needs, it might be better if you were more understanding of Mom handling it in her own way." Ray's eyes scanned the room, meeting the gaze of each family member. They all seemed to support this idea of his wife seeking fulfillment elsewhere. In that moment, he felt a profound sense of age and irrelevance wash over him, as if he had aged decades in mere seconds. "And you all agree with this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Their nods confirmed their unanimous stance. But Ray needed more assurance. "Leo, do you agree with them?" he asked, seeking affirmation from his son. "Right, it's not like you'd be around," his son replied. "And it would support Mom." "Eric?" Ray inquired, looking towards his son-in-law, Christine's husband. Ray had never seen him oppose his wife and didn't expect him to start now. "I don't see why it would be a problem, Ray." "Rebecca?" Ray turned to his daughter-in-law, who seemed a bit withdrawn next to Leo. "Oh, Dad, I'm not sure." She hesitated, trying to sidestep giving a direct response. Ray always found it curious that, even after 2 decades, Eric maintained a formal address, while Rebecca had quickly adopted calling him Dad. "Don't be shy, Rebecca. You've been part of the family for 3 years now. You're a grown woman, I value your opinion." "Well, it might be fine, as long as everything's handled respectfully." Then it was his granddaughter's turn. Coming from a different generation, he guessed they might view things differently. Attitudes towards relationships seemed more relaxed nowadays, but he wondered where they stood. He cherished the times they spent together, from attending recitals to shopping sprees. Would they support this? "What do you girls think?" "Grandpa, we're not sure if we should weigh in on this." "Come on, you're both mature enough, nearly adults. I'm interested in your perspective." Julia and Allison exchanged looks, then glanced at their parents, who seemed to encourage them to speak freely. Ray sensed what they were about to say. Influenced by their mother, they might just echo her stance. "Well, Julia, the older one, started. A lot of our friends are open to their partners seeing other people. It's more about personal choice." That phrase, personal choice, was a common justification. Ray had expected it to come up, but was still surprised by its arrival. It seemed his wife was determined to pursue her path, regardless of his views or emotions. Whatever they once shared seemed irretrievably altered. He looked at Josie, who waited expectantly for his reaction. "That's it then, Josephine. The decision is made. I guess you get your way." Ray saw a spark of joy in his wife's eyes, as if her deepest wish had been fulfilled. Turning away, he headed towards the front door. Barely a few steps away, he heard Josephine call out his name. For a fleeting moment, he hoped she might have had a change of heart, seeing his distress. But it was not to be. "Can I tell Luke you were just joking earlier?" "Yeah, sure. I'm going for a drive." "But Dad," Leo's voice chimed in. "We're about to leave for the fireworks." "Go without me," Ray replied, his voice devoid of enthusiasm. "I'm not in the mood." The house fell silent as Ray exited, but the muffled sounds of celebration reached his ears the moment the door shut. Peering back through the window, he saw Josephine surrounded by comforting arms. They seemed united against him. As soon as the mini-celebration dwindled, Josephine was on the phone. She reassured her friend that Ray had relented. She needed to confirm that her friend was still available for their planned meeting. The call was brief, reassurances were made. Meanwhile, the family loaded up in the car, heading to the city's spectacular fireworks display. Their laughter and chatter filled the air, relieved to leave the recent tension behind, convinced Ray would come around. At that very moment, as Eric found a parking spot, the family now fitting into one car instead of two, Ray sat alone in his car on a hillside overlooking the city. This place, discovered years ago, was his refuge for contemplation. He was deeply hurt by his family's unanimous stance. He had hoped at least someone would understand that his challenges weren't a justification for betrayal, but they stood together against him. He felt like an outsider, obsolete and dismissed. This reminded him of a harsh tradition he'd heard about in his youth, where the elderly were left alone when deemed too weak to contribute, seen as a burden. He felt similarly cast aside, an inconvenient presence. All he desired now was rest, but even sleep seemed elusive. It was close to midnight when he returned home. His daughter's car was still there, along with Josie's, but the others had left. The sound of the car locking must have caught the attention of those inside, because as he neared the front door, it swung open. Josie stood there. "Where have you been? I've been so worried." Ray walked past his wife without responding. He saw his daughter on the couch, her gaze fixed on him curiously. "Why are you here?" he asked. "Mom was worried when you didn't come back after the fireworks. Everyone else had to leave early, so I stayed with her. You could have at least answered your phone." Ray remembered turning off his phone earlier, seeking some peace on the mountain. "I'm fine, as you can see. You can go home now." Christine was shocked. Her father, always so gentle and polite, had never spoken like this before. She quietly grabbed her purse, kissed her mother goodbye, and left. Later, after tidying up, Josie found Ray already asleep in their bedroom. The following week, the atmosphere at home was tense. Josie knew Ray was unhappy with her actions involving Luke, but she hoped he'd come to accept it, given their love for each other. For Ray, it felt like a betrayal. Despite his dedication to his family for over 4 decades, he felt discarded. The fact that Josie had sought her family's support in her actions, and that they had sided with her, was the final straw for Ray. He had always put them first, but that was about to change. On Saturday morning, as he had done for years, Ray drove to the country club to play golf with his group. 8 men would meet, creating 2 foursomes, and mix up the pairs each week. Ray tried to concentrate on the game, though his mind was elsewhere. It wasn't his best game, but he tried to keep up appearances despite the difficulties. Back at his home, Josie observed Ray depart for his golf game at 7 a.m. She attempted to show some affection with a farewell kiss, but he was distant and only allowed a brief peck on his cheek. Josie felt a twinge of guilt about her husband's apparent distress, but her attention shifted quickly as Luke arrived, having parked discreetly down the street. Josie waited for Luke to knock before letting him in. Dressed in her robe, she quickly discarded it after shutting the door, and they embraced in a deep, heartfelt kiss. Luke effortlessly lifted Josie in his arms and carried her to the bedroom, gently laying her on the bed. Luke disrobed, revealing his preference for mature partners over those his own age. He reflected on the mutual favors exchanged in past encounters. Josie, though older than his usual partners, had a youthful spirit that belied her 59 years. Josie admired Luke's fit physique, a contrast to Ray, who had lost some of his physical vigor with age. She reminded herself to focus on the present, not to dwell on comparisons. Josie, maintaining her personal grooming preferences despite Luke's suggestion, eagerly welcomed their intimate encounter. She had missed the physical connection, something that had waned in her relationship with Ray. Their routine was well established. Josie would ensure Luke was satisfied quickly, enabling a longer, uninterrupted time together. As a woman in her late 50s, her physical responses required patience, and she preferred a seamless experience. That morning, Josie's expertise, honed over the years, allowed her to quickly fulfill Luke's desires. She adeptly managed the aftermath, a skill she had perfected, which reinvigorated Luke immediately. Their morning together was a blend of physical closeness and a deep, albeit complicated, connection, reflecting the complex emotion and desires that drove their relationship. Preparing for Luke's arrival, Josie took care to ensure everything was just right. She wanted to feel comfortable and at ease, so she used a special gel, thinking it might entice Luke, who usually wasn't keen on certain intimacies. Their routine was familiar yet satisfying. Luke focused on her upper body, a preference Josie was content with. His touch, aided by the gel, made her relax and lose herself in the moment. In their relationship, Josie happily followed Ray's lead, finding pleasure in a more passive role. Their physical connection typically followed traditional patterns, with Josie rarely taking the initiative. Her experiences with Luke, however, were a new chapter in her life. As they got together, Luke understood her needs and gently joined with her. Initially, adjusting to Luke's physique had been a challenge for Josie, but now she welcomed him with ease. Their movements were gentle and considerate, Luke always mindful of their age difference. Josie felt a deep satisfaction, a feeling she had missed due to Ray's health issues. The thought of losing this connection when Ray discovered their secret was unbearable. Despite the complications, Josie had managed to keep her relationship with Luke, even involving her family to persuade Ray, something she had mixed feelings about. As their time together intensified, Luke's rhythm quickened. Josie found herself ready for this change of pace, embracing Luke's affection and the deeper connection they shared. They switched positions, with Josie presenting herself differently, and Luke immediately adapted. Josie immersed herself in the intensity of their connection, responding to Luke's strength and vigor. Reflecting on her past with Ray, Josie realized how things had evolved over time. It's natural for dynamics to change with age, but the contrast became stark when she experienced something different with Luke. She treasured the new experiences, unwilling to let them go. Their time together spanned a couple of hours. Afterward, Luke freshened up in the shower, while Josie busied herself with changing the bed sheets and doing laundry. Together, they made the bed anew before Luke left. Josie then took her turn in the shower, meticulously cleansing herself. It was essential for her to ensure no trace remained, out of respect for Ray. She was careful not to bear any physical reminders from Luke, and diligently erased any evidence from their home. By 12:30, Josie was confident that both she and the house were immaculate, prepared to greet Ray, who would be returning anytime soon. She had indulged in her own pursuits and was now ready to devote her focus to Ray for the coming week. Ray's usual return time was between 12:30 and 1 p.m. When he hadn't shown up by 2 p.m., Josie felt a twinge of anxiety, but it wasn't overwhelming. However, by 3 p.m., her concern grew, prompting her to call his cell, only to be greeted by his voicemail. After several unanswered calls and texts by 5 p.m., her worry intensified. At 7 p.m., with still no word from Ray, Josie contacted her daughter. She briefed Christine on the situation, and soon, Christine, her husband, and Josie's granddaughters gathered in the living room. Eric, Christine's husband, even drove to the country club seeking any information about Ray, but learned only that Ray had left hours earlier. Christine called the police, who informed her that there were no reports of accidents involving Ray, and it was too soon to file a missing persons report. However, they would keep his name on file. With no new leads and unfamiliar with Ray's golfing acquaintances, all Josie could do was wait. Close to 11 p.m., Julia, stationed near the front of the house, noticed headlights in the driveway. Sensing tension in the air, she and her sister retreated upstairs. Eric had already retired to bed earlier. That left Josie and Christine to confront Ray when he entered. Ray was not surprised to see Josie's evident anger in the foyer, and only slightly taken aback to see Christine in the living room, having noticed her car outside. He had hoped for some privacy with Josie, but it seemed Christine was there in full support of her mother. "Where have you been?" Josie asked sharply. "Just out playing golf," Ray replied with calm. "Golf doesn't take over 12 hours, she countered. "Well, yes. After golf, I grabbed lunch at the club. They make a mean chicken piccata, then caught a Dwayne Johnson movie. Predictable, but fun. And then, Raymond, I don't need a play-by-play of your day." Josie interrupted. "You wanted to know where I'd been," Ray muttered. "I'm wondering why you didn't come home right after golf like you usually do, and why you ignored your phone all day." "My phone didn't ring because it was off," he explained, showing her his switched-off phone. "And I didn't come home because I didn't want to be here when your guest was around." "That's absurd, Raymond. We were done with our gathering way before your golf ended. There was no reason for you to avoid coming home," Josie argued. "That's your view, Josephine. I just didn't want to encounter any reminders of him in the house. I'll say it again, I won't be here when he is. Now, it's late, I'm heading to bed." Ray walked past Josie, offering a stern glance to his daughter but remaining silent, heading to the bedroom. He half expected someone to follow him, but no one did. As he got ready for bed, he heard other voices outside and realized Christine's entire family had been over. Wonderful. By the time Josie came to bed after bidding farewell to her guests, Ray was already asleep, or at least feigning it. She hesitated, considering waking him for a further discussion, but ultimately decided against it and prepared for bed herself. The next weekend was similar. No calls, no texts. Josie accepted that Ray would be gone the whole day, using the time to thoroughly tidy up the house. As evening approached, Josie felt uneasy about being alone in the house, so she called Christine for some company until Ray returned. Eric and their daughters stayed back at their own place. Close to 11 p.m., Ray arrived home, surprised to see Christine's car outside. He wondered if there was going to be another difficult discussion. Entering the house, he was greeted warmly by Josie with a kiss on the cheek and a cheerful daughter in the background. "Why don't you go change, then tell me about your day?" Josie suggested, leaving Ray slightly puzzled. Josie headed to the kitchen to prepare some drinks, while Ray went to the bedroom to change. He thought maybe Josie was in a good mood because she had a pleasant day. He changed and returned to the living room, finding Christine seemingly ready to leave but waiting for him. "Dad, I know this is tough for you, but I want to say it's great how you're supporting Mom in this way. It's really making a difference," Christine expressed. Supporting her, Ray thought. Is it their view? "Now, Christine, this is the final time we're discussing this. Make sure everyone knows," Ray said firmly. "Got it, Dad. I'll let everyone know," Christine replied, kissing him on the cheek before leaving. Shortly after, Josie came in with their drinks. Ray couldn't help but wonder if this moment was orchestrated to let Christine express her thoughts. In the following months, Josie continued her relationship with Luke, while Ray explored new hobbies. He kept up with his golf on Saturdays and watched movies he liked, but also tried bowling, miniature golf, and arcade games. He didn't excel, but he enjoyed himself. At home, life was routine. They avoided talking about Luke, shared dinner each night, and engaged in light, general conversation. Their emotional closeness had shifted. Josie, believing her relationship with Luke didn't impact her marriage, continued showing affection to Ray, who seemed less responsive than before. Maybe Josie had grown too complacent in the situation. It could be that Ray's silence about Luke had given her the impression he was more accepting of it than he truly was. So, when Thanksgiving rolled around, Ray was in for a surprise. "Mom, Luke's here," announced Christine from the front of the house. Ray had been lounging in his recliner, engrossed in the newspaper, when he heard this statement. Had he been drinking anything, it would have been sprayed across the room. "Great," exclaimed his wife. "We weren't sure if he'd make it." Ray pressed the lever to lower his footrest and sprang from his chair, catching Josie's eye. "Why is he here?" Ray blurted out, visibly upset. "I invited him for Thanksgiving," Josie replied calmly. "He doesn't have any family around and had nowhere else to go. You know, I've made it clear I don't want to be in the same place as him. That's why I'm out every Saturday. And now you bring him into our home on a holiday. This is my home too, Raymond. It's not like there's anything inappropriate going on. It's just like when the kids were young and their friends came over. Just a dinner, and I expect you to behave." Josie turned and walked towards the front door to welcome her guest, brushing off her husband's concerns and feeling justified in standing up for her. Well, they were more than friends, but she also viewed Luke as a companion. She thought it was a kind gesture for a friend. She welcomed Luke at the door, introducing him to her children, their partners, and her granddaughters. Taking his hand, she led him towards the living room to meet Ray. She began speaking even before they fully entered the room. "Luke, you remember my..." But Ray was nowhere to be seen. He wasn't in his chair anymore. Josie glanced around, guessing he might have stepped into the bathroom. As she moved towards the bedroom, the sound of the garage door opener activated. Reaching the kitchen, she saw the garage door closing and Ray's car driving away. "Was that Dad leaving?" Christine inquired. "Yes, it was," Josie confirmed. "Where's he off to?" "Who knows?" Josie replied, clearly frustrated, as she hurried to her bedroom to get ready. Luke approached Christine just as Josie's bedroom door shut. "Is there anything I can do? Should I leave?" he inquired. "No, Luke, you're fine here. It's Dad's problem, not yours. You're welcome to stay. I just don't want to cause any issues, but if you're sure." "We understand, Luke, and we're grateful." During the meal, the family engaged in lively conversation with Luke, who was new to them but showed genuine interest in everyone. Post-meal, Luke joined Leo and Eric in watching a football game, while the women went out. Unnoticed, Ray's car drove by. The holiday gathering wound down by 10 p.m. The house was tidied, dishes washed. The women returned from shopping, not having bought much. Leo and Eric had dozed off on the couch, and Ray was still absent. Christine gently woke her husband and kids, suggesting they head home. She planned to stay with her mother for the night, having kept some essentials at her parents' house for such occasions. Leo and Rebecca left, and Christine settled in to wait with her mom. Close to midnight, Ray returned. He hoped Josie would be asleep, but she was up, waiting. Instead of engaging in their usual argument, he walked past her to his chair and resumed reading his newspaper, ignoring her. Josie, undeterred, confronted him. "Where have you been all day?" she demanded. "I had dinner at Denny's, then went to the movies. We had a wonderful meal here, Raymond." "Why did you go to Denny's?" "It wasn't about the food, Josephine. It was the company. I can't believe you, at 64, can't show basic courtesy to a guest in our home. I would never disrespect a guest of yours like that. I made it clear I wouldn't share this house with him, not ever. And it wasn't just about him being here for your convenience. It was a promise you broke. It was only a meal, Ray." "To you, maybe," Ray replied, then hid behind his newspaper, ending the conversation. After a quiet 5 minutes, Christine, his daughter who seemed to side against him, kneeled beside him. "Dad, please try to see that he's important to her. It's not love, but she didn't want him to feel alone during the holidays. And you're okay with your mother inviting this guy into our family." "He's not family, Dad. Just someone in her life. A friend." Ray realized arguing was futile. "All right, Christine. I understand. I hope so, Dad. Take care." Christine left with a kiss on his cheek. Josie didn't show up again that night, and when Ray eventually dragged himself to the bedroom, she was already asleep. Thanksgiving marked a change. Affection dwindled as Ray and Josie turned into something more like housemates. Josie felt justified in seeking companionship elsewhere, seeing Ray's disapproval as self-centered. Ray viewed it as a betrayal of their long marriage. They were cordial and communicated when necessary, but the love from their 40-year union was fading. When Josie said she needed to do last-minute Christmas shopping, Ray didn't question it, though it was unusual for her. He understood where she was going, not needing to follow or track her. Her expression said it all. Whether it was just gift exchange or more, he knew she was spending time with him. On New Year's Eve, Ray gave Josie a perfunctory midnight kiss, lacking their usual passion. Josie, unable to reach Luke, called him the next day to wish him a happy new year. As Valentine's Day neared, Ray planned a special dinner at a fancy seafood restaurant, which thrilled Josie, hinting at a possible reconnection with her husband. However, Ray harbored suspicions. Josie's fondness for spending holidays with her companion made him question her plans for Valentine's Day, a day traditionally meant for lovers. Doubting Josie would miss celebrating with Luke, Ray decided to discreetly observe his house. From a nearby parking spot, he saw Luke arrive and hesitantly knock on the door, waiting for Josie. Ray felt certain they weren't just there for a chat. This was their own way of observing Valentine's Day, clearly more than casual friends. The dinner that night was quiet. Josie entered with hope and positivity, anticipating a revived bond with Ray, but his previously cheerful demeanor had vanished. She felt let down but strived to remain optimistic, puzzled by his sudden change. Easter, in their household without young kids, was more an occasion for a grand family meal than anything else. They still indulged in hiding oversized, plastic eggs with little surprises inside, maintaining the holiday cheer. To Ray's comfort, Luke was absent from the Easter gathering. Josie had respected this boundary since a past Thanksgiving mishap. Yet, Ray knew she met Luke more frequently than he was aware, including on Valentine's Day, and likely on other days too. After the Easter morning activities, Ray excused himself, claiming fatigue, but really wanting to distance himself from a family he felt had wronged him. He sought solitude, opening a window to welcome a fresh breeze, only to overhear Josie and their daughter Christine's conversation. "How's Luke?" Christine whispered, mindful of her father's proximity. "Keep it down," Josie cautioned. "I don't want your dad to overhear." Christine lowered her voice but remained audible to Ray. "I'm just surprised Mom has a friend so much younger." "He's not really my boyfriend, Christine." "Hey Mom, you're seeing him quite often, aren't you? You guys have lunch together multiple times a week. It might not be official, but it sounds like he's practically your boyfriend." "Fine, he's my boyfriend. I just don't want to upset your father." "I understand, Mom. I love Dad too and don't want to see him hurt. But let's face it, Dad's age is catching up with him, and you're still so full of life. He's just 5 years older than me, Christine. Age-wise, yes, but you're so vibrant and active, while Dad needs his rest. You deserve some happiness. To be honest, I kind of envy you rediscovering the thrill of a new relationship. Has anyone else figured it out? That it's more than just casual? Leo, Eric, and Rebecca know. I haven't told the younger ones. And are they okay with it? Leo and Eric get it. They think you should have the chance to be happy, especially since Dad isn't in the same place anymore. Rebecca's not entirely on board, but she's keeping quiet to protect Dad." As Ray overheard this conversation, the realization of his wife's deep involvement and his daughter's support of her new relationship hit him hard. He had been cautiously preparing for the possibility of a separation, motivated by his love for his family and his long-standing marriage to Josie. Now, it seemed, it was time for him to take definitive action. Ray silently closed the window and retreated to his bed. In the months that followed, Ray's relationships with his wife and daughter grew increasingly cold. He also faced challenges connecting with his son and son-in-law but made extra efforts with Rebecca and his granddaughters, holding on to the belief that they were too young to fully understand the situation. Mother's Day. This day was a long-standing tradition in the family, celebrated with a lavish brunch at a sophisticated French-style restaurant. The quality of the food and service was exceptional, matched by the cost. In earlier days, Ray would take the family out to honor his wife and their mother. As the children grew older and began working, they took on the responsibility of organizing these festivities, just like they did for Father's Day. In this unique family, celebrations were often divided. For years, Ray had skipped Mother's Day and Josie, Father's Day. They let the children enjoy these days with the respective parent, while they kept their own sentiments to themselves. However, recent events had stirred something in Ray. Instead of enjoying his usual solitude, he found himself dressing up and driving to the restaurant where he knew Josie had gone about half an hour earlier. Ray had no plans to join the brunch or make his presence known. He doubted he'd even need to leave his car. He drove around the restaurant parking lot, spotting the familiar cars of Christine and Eric, then Josie's, and finally Leo and Rebecca's. He was almost convinced his suspicions were unfounded until he saw it, Luke's car, unmistakably parked in a corner. The sight confirmed his worst fears. His wife or daughter had invited Josie's paramour to a family gathering, fully aware of his absence. This latest act of disregard reignited a buried anger in Ray, altering his initial resolve. Frustrated, Ray drove back home, grabbed his golf clubs, and headed to the local driving range. He hit ball after ball, not keeping track, finding some solace in the physical exertion. By the end, he was tired, his shots less precise, but he felt a sense of relief. Returning home, ready for a rest, he was met by Josie. He wondered briefly if she had spent some time with Luke, but the sting of such thoughts no longer affected him as deeply. He questioned whether she would admit to inviting Luke, if given the chance. "How was your Mother's Day celebration with your family?" Ray inquired, emphasizing family. "It was lovely, Ray. Thank you for asking. I had a wonderful time with the children, Josie responded. As the 4th of July neared, Josie's spirits were high, and Ray understood the reason all too well. Having been part of Josie's life for nearly a year, he saw through her contented facade. She seemed to have everything she wanted, a supportive husband and a younger partner who she met several times a week. In her eyes, her life was almost idyllic. Luke, her boyfriend, was great in many ways, except he was hesitant about certain intimacies. With Ray no longer physically close to her, this was the one aspect Josie felt her life lacked. However, she accepted this compromise. Luke's new job required him to work evenings, which ironically gave him more afternoons to spend with Josie. Financial gain was not her motive for being with Luke. To avoid any suspicion from Ray, they steered clear of Josie's bedroom, except on set of mornings. This led them to Luke's apartment or occasionally a friend's place, considering Luke had roommates. The challenge for Josie was keeping Luke away from family events. She hadn't discussed this again with Ray, doubting he'd be receptive. Her ideal situation was for Ray and Luke to at least be on amicable terms. She valued her time with both, seeing no conflict of interests. Yet, with regret, she didn't invite Luke to the family barbecue and fireworks. The family gathered early to help with the preparations. Ray was noticeably active, perhaps to justify his tiredness later. He kept an eye out, half expecting Luke to show up, but he didn't. As the day progressed, Ray feigned exhaustion, maybe a bit too convincingly, as Josie approached him with concern. "Honey, why don't you rest a bit for the fireworks later?" she suggested kindly. Ray grappled with the complexity of his feelings. Knowing Josie's genuine care for him made what he was about to do even more difficult. "I think I'll skip the fireworks and just enjoy the day with everyone here, then head to bed early. Are you going to miss it again this year?" "You always seemed to enjoy it before," Josie said, her voice laced with concern. She was referring to the annual fireworks show, a tradition he had skipped last year. "Yeah, I think I'll sit this one out. Getting old, I guess. But don't worry, everyone else will have a great time," he replied with a shrug. "All right, if you're sure," Josie said, though her tone suggested she was anything but convinced. As Josie left, she hurried off to find Christine. Watching her disappear into the crowd, he realized what this was all about. Josie was checking if he'd be at the fireworks because she wanted to invite Luke. It shouldn't bother him, but the thought of it was like a sharp jab to his heart. As the evening drew to a close, only family remained. Josie, Christine, Leo, and Eric each asked him if he was sure about not going to the fireworks, expressing how much they'd miss him. He knew what this was. His place in the family wasn't what it used to be. When it was time for the family to leave for the show, he interacted with each one, trying to savor the good memories they had shared. He hugged his granddaughters the longest, feeling a deep sense of loss. He watched them leave in Christine's minivan, their absence leaving a hollow feeling inside him. With a heavy heart, he went about his own evening. The family got back later than usual. Josie had taken some time to be with Luke, grateful for his company since he didn't have family nearby. They had all warmed up to Luke, happy to see Josie so content with him. Their farewells were said at the park, as it was clear Luke wouldn't be coming back to their house. They tried to be quiet as they entered, not wanting to disturb him. Settling around the dining table, they chatted and enjoyed drinks. It was only after a while that Josie remembered Ray, asking Leo to check on him. In the master bedroom, Leo didn't find Ray asleep. Instead, he found the bed made, the white sheets Josie loved so much neatly exposed. On those sheets lay Ray's wedding ring and a flash drive, an ominous sign of something amiss. "He's gone," Leo announced as he stepped out of the bedroom. "What do you mean he's gone?" his mother inquired, a mix of confusion and concern in her voice. "Exactly what I said, Mom. The bed looks like no one slept in it, and look what I found next to his pillow on the sheets." Josie, not entirely convinced by her son's words, ventured into the bedroom to see for herself. True enough, the bed was untouched, and there was no trace of her husband. When she returned to the living room, she saw Eric already connecting a flash drive to a laptop, eager to discover its contents. A single, rather large file was all that was visible. Eric looked at his mother, who nodded silently, and he clicked on the file. The video player on the computer sprang to life, and Eric expanded the image to fill the screen. Initially, it was just a blank wall accompanied by distant voices. Then Ray appeared in front of the camera. "Is this thing recording?" he asked someone off screen. "Yes," a woman's voice responded. Ray faced the camera. "Good evening, everyone. If my timing is right, you're watching this a little after 10 p.m., having just returned from the fireworks display." Everyone instinctively glanced at the clock, realizing it was almost 11 p.m. They hadn't thought to check on Ray earlier. "As you're watching this, I'm on a plane soaring through the skies, far from the United States, and I won't be returning." Josie's cry of disbelief cut through the room as she broke down. The video continued. "You've all betrayed me. My wife, who enjoyed my love and support for over 40 years, who never had to work except for raising our kids, cast me aside for someone younger. And when I expressed my hurt, she turned our family against me. I thought my years of loyalty, dedication, and faithfulness meant something, Josephine. I thought I deserved better. Your desires, which were really just whims, should have considered my feelings. It was hard enough dealing with your secrecy, but having our family side with you was unbearable. I felt like my heart was shattered that day. Christine, your actions hurt me deeply, echoing the pain caused by your mother's choices. Growing up, you were always so close to me, my little daddy's girl. We shared so many moments together. To think that you would side with your mother in her deception against me, that you would justify her unfaithfulness, it's a betrayal that cuts even deeper than her actions alone. The thought that you believed I was undeserving of loyalty added to my anguish, even if those words had never left your lips. I never said that. Christine protested vehemently. I would never. Leo, Eric, I'm baffled by your naivety. Do you not see the precarious situation you've put yourselves in? Leo, perhaps Rebecca wouldn't betray you, but Eric, some remarks from my daughter should raise your alarms. All it takes is a small excuse, a minor dissatisfaction, and she might follow her mother's footsteps. She even once expressed envy over her mother's newfound freedom. Eric's gaze turned sharply towards Christine, who shook her head, trying to deny the implications of Ray's accusations. No, darling, those words never came from me, and that's not who I am, she reassured. Ray's voice filled the room again from the speaker. It's a tricky situation, isn't it? You've seemingly given the green light for indiscretions, unless, of course, it's only acceptable when it doesn't affect you directly, Eric. You might be okay with others facing betrayal, but I doubt you'd be as understanding if it were your turn. And Christine, if you're denying such inclinations, then why the double standard? Why is it wrong for you but not for your mother? Your response would be quite revealing. Eric paused the video, turning to face his wife with a serious expression. Did you really say you envied your mom? He asked cautiously. My words might have been misconstrued. I remember feeling excited about my mom experiencing the thrill of a new relationship, the initial stages of getting to know someone. It wasn't about wanting that for myself. So, you're interested in getting to know someone new? Eric asked, a hint of concern in his voice. No, love, please don't overthink it. My heart is with you, and I have no desire to be with anyone else. And if I fall short in some way, he pressed, let's not delve into this now. We need to focus on my mom's situation first. All right, but we're not done discussing this. Eric resumed the video, and Ray's speech continued. I couldn't continue in a marriage where my partner, Josephine, was unfaithful to me repeatedly, especially after I realized the frequency of her indiscretions had increased. It was quite a surprise to see her bring her secret companion to our family's Mother's Day celebration. That was in poor taste. As you can imagine, I'm not going to disclose my current location. Even if you do manage to find me, it won't change anything. Regarding our finances, I've taken most of our savings, feeling it's time to prioritize my own well-being after years of putting others first. Josephine, I've left you the house, which, as you know, is fully paid and worth a considerable sum. My lawyer will assist you with the sale if you choose to go that route. In the bank, you'll find about $400,000. That's $10,000 for each year of our good times together, excluding the last year. Don't worry about me. I've taken our other assets, including investments, leaving me quite comfortable. I doubt any of you are too concerned, given the way I've been treated lately. And if you're wondering about my future companionship, rest easy. And not alone. I'd like to introduce Deborah. She just appeared beside me in this video. Hello, everyone, Deborah, an elegant brunette in her 50s, greeted, waving at the camera. Deborah and I have grown close over the last few months, especially after I shared my marital troubles with her. We've spent significant time together, realizing how well we get along. Josephine, you might remember Deborah. You've met her a few times. She's been a colleague for over 30 years in the marketing department and recently took early retirement to start a new chapter with me. We've been friends for years, and now our bond has evolved into a desire for simple companionship, sharing affectionate moments and deepening our connection. I'm looking forward to this new journey. The camera then shifted to Josephine, whose expression revealed her discomfort with the news. The video stopped. Mom, are you okay? Leo inquired. No, Leo, I'm not okay. But let's just finish this, she responded, trying to compose herself. Eric pressed play once again. Josephine, Ray began, his voice taking on a grave tone. Ever since our paths crossed, my heart has belonged to you. I couldn't have imagined, even in my wildest dreams, that things would turn out this way. I envisioned a future filled with joyous family gatherings, surrounded by our children, their children, and maybe even their little ones. It's heartbreaking to know that our dreams have been shattered because of choices you made. I hope, for your sake, that those choices were worth it. You won't have to worry about finances. There's enough for you, especially if you decide to sell the house. And if you ever need more, I'm sure those who sided with you will lend a helping hand. It's ironic, though, considering it was my efforts that helped them succeed in life. I've spent countless nights trying to understand why you risked everything we had. This past year has been nothing short of agonizing, and the pain only deepened with time. I was aware of the extra hours you spent away, and part of me could have ended this charade months ago. But I chose Independence Day to reclaim my own freedom, to make a statement. There's a part of me that will always hold on to the love we shared, the memories we created. I wish our story had a different ending, but at some point, you lost sight of the us in our marriage, turning it into a solitary journey. I've always endeavored to make decisions that were best for us, not just for me. Unlike your choices with Luke. Maybe you thought I'd just accept it, given how I've always put your needs first. But I guess we'll never know. The fact remains, what's done is done, and it's irreversible. For your sake, I hope it was worth it. Farewell, Josephine. I'll mourn for what we could have shared. Ray's gaze pierced the camera before the screen slowly faded to black. Everyone in the room was moved to tears, each processing the events in their own way. None had anticipated that Josie's actions would drive Ray to this point. He had always been so accommodating, so forgiving. But this time, they had all underestimated his resolve. Exhausted and heavy-hearted, they all spent that night at Josie's house, offering her their support in the wake of this unforeseen turn of events. Epilogue. Rebecca was tidying up her kitchen when her phone buzzed. She hardly received any calls, except from her husband, Leo, or the usual unimportant ones. Glancing at the screen, she saw the caller ID was hidden. Intrigued, she decided to pick up. Hello, Rebecca, it's Ray. Ray, wow, how have you been? Where are you now? I'm doing well, Rebecca, really well. I'd rather keep my location a secret for the time being. But tell me, how are you? I'm actually doing great, Dad. I have some exciting news. I'm expecting. That's wonderful news. How long? Just a few months in. We found out right after you left. It's hard to believe you've been away for nearly 3 weeks. It sure does. And thanks for still calling me Dad. I was worried I might have lost that privilege. You'll always be Dad to me. Actually, Dad, I need to apologize. That day, when everyone was confronting you and you asked for our thoughts, I should have spoken up. I was new to the family and felt intimidated. I had a hunch, but it probably wouldn't have changed much. Josie and Christine were quite determined. You're forgiven, don't worry. Thank you, Dad. It means a lot, especially now that I'm hoping my child will have both grandfathers in their life. Will you be part of it? I'm not sure yet. I don't plan on returning to the States, but maybe we can figure something out. I'd love to meet you and the baby. So, how's everything back there? Well, in one word, tense. Josie is often upset, though she still meets Luke often. Christine and Eric are facing challenges. They're not talking much about it, but I think your observation about her using it as an excuse really got to her. And how are things with you and Leo? We're good. We're still in the early days of our marriage, so it's all quite new. I think for Christine and Eric, being together for so long, it just makes them more cautious. The girls are really upset, though. Is that so? I'm surprised. They really miss you. They still don't see much issue with casual relationships, but they do understand that it's different when you're married. I get it. I could see Christine's influence in their responses. Listen, can you gather everyone at your place tonight? I think I'm ready to talk to them. I don't think that would be a problem, Dad. We'll speak tonight. That evening, the whole family gathered in Leo and Rebecca's living room. It was clear that Luke was not welcome at this gathering. Rebecca had prepared some simple snacks for sandwiches, but the anxious atmosphere meant that few had much appetite. The phone rang sharply at 8. Rebecca switched her phone to speaker mode. Hi, Dad. We're all here. Thanks, sweetheart. Just so you all know, Deborah is with me too. Let's keep this conversation civil, no shouting, okay? A low chorus of agreement echoed from the family. Great. I wanted to have this talk, but thought it best to wait a bit. I reached out to Rebecca first, suspecting she might not fully agree with the rest of you. Leo, congrats on the baby. Thanks, Dad. I hope to be as good a father as you were. The key is to always love their mother. That's the best thing for your kids. Allison, Julia. Here, Grandpa, the granddaughters chimed together. Girls, I'm disappointed you sided with your grandmother in this, but I've been convinced that maybe you felt pressured and didn't fully grasp the complexity of adult relationships and a long marriage. I'll talk to you both more later, okay? Sure, Grandpa. We just really miss you. I miss you too. Maybe you two can find something to do while we adults talk. After brief goodbyes, the girls left, giving their grandmother a quick hug. So, Ray continued. Anyone have something pressing to say? Josie, as expected, was the first to speak. Ray, please, come back. We could have worked through this if I knew you were thinking of leaving. Why did it have to get to that point, Josephine? I made it clear I wasn't happy, yet you kept involving him in our family and seeing him frequently. You replaced me while we were just sharing a house. That was too much for me, but you never spoke of it again. I believed you had come to terms with it, had realized it was just a habit of mine. It created a rift in our marriage, an irreparable one. From the moment I discovered your actions and your preference for him, our marriage was destined to fail. I'm sorry, Ray. Is there no chance for us? No, Josephine, there isn't. Even if I wish to, which I don't, I have committed to Deborah now, and I plan to stay true to that. What about your promise to me? You made that first. Indeed, I did, and I would have continued to honor it. But in my eyes, when you broke your promise, you freed me from mine, allowing me to make a new commitment, which I have done. Silence enveloped the room, punctuated only by Josie's quiet tears. Josie, Ray said gently, I'm sorry, but this conversation is pointless. Intentional or not, you pushed me away. We can't undo that. Josie stood without another word, seeking solace in Christine and Eric's room. Christine confronted him. Really, Dad? Did you call just to upset Mom and make her cry? just because your pride was hurt that she found comfort with someone else. That's one perspective, Christine. And Eric, how's your pride? Comfortable with the idea of someone else bringing your wife happiness? Christine's aggressive stance faltered under Eric's stern look. Throughout their marriage, Christine had been the assertive one, with Eric often yielding to keep the peace. But recent events had shifted the dynamics, and Christine realized her marriage was now facing serious challenges. Supporting another woman's decision against her husband couldn't happen without some sense of shared guilt. No, Ray, it isn't. And you're right, I hadn't seen it that way. My wife and I are dealing with significant problems because of all this. My comment, truthfully, if she had approached him before getting involved with someone else, it's uncertain whether it would have changed anything. But at least, she could have claimed she made an effort, rather than blindsiding him with it. For me, the infidelity wasn't the most hurtful aspect. It was the lack of respect and the way she turned his own family against him.